Caribbean Garden Living. Yeah, man, here on YouTube. Welcome, beloved family. Yeah. Give thanks for a new day. Give thanks for a new rise. You know, give thanks for another moment in the Herbal Laws Garden. Yeah. Where, we show the Caribbean garden living. It become a lifestyle. And this morning, yeah, these are some callaloo plants. They are like 2 weeks old from seedling. Yeah, and this is a raised bed garden. This one was built out of blocks and stone. Yeah, and created a raised bed garden. So I'm watering the callaloo plants. Yeah. Beloved ones, Caribbean garden living, yeah, or Caribbean farming living, is one that I grew up with. As a child growing up in the 80s and the 90s, my experience, there was no fast food shop. There was no fast food place. It was just all about farming. Our parents, our grandparents, our uncle. Yeah, this is what they do. So there was no other option. There was no other option than farming. We used to with yam with banana. Yeah, we used to with callaloo, with cabbage. That's Caribbean living. To use the term now, real living, it may sound away to some people, but it's not just real, but this is who we are. This is how we grew up. This is what was introduced to us by our parents. Introducing farming. Those who could afford fish. Those who could afford to buy fish. Whenever the fisherman come from sea, would buy that. But fish then would be an expensive meal. Most of the people who I grew up around, were 90% of the people who grew up in my community. Because I grew up in the country area, Portland to be exact, Jamaica, Portland. And 85% of the people in my community, farmers, they were farmers. The man in the family, who is the head of the family, he took care of his family by doing farming. There were a lot of fishermen in my community also. But as I said, fish was expensive. Now we are in the 20th century and there are a lot of options. The first time I saw a pizza meal is I came to Kingston as a early teen, and was introduced to pizza, and that was surprising to I, because We don't know nothing about that. You know? But then though, even though we would classify ourselves as not the rich class, but our parents used to cook a different type of meal every day. So you wouldn't eat the same thing every day. One day you might have, saltfish, you might have you might have vegetable one day. Sunday was rice and peas. Yeah, for those who grew up in Jamaica, yeah, Sunday was a rice and peas day. Maybe Saturday would be soup. Yeah, if you grew up in the Caribbean or if you grew up in a Jamaica, yeah, type it in the comment section if you know what I talk about. Yeah, so every day would be a different type of meal. Now, kudos to those who, appreciate the lifestyle now. Because even if I go out and eat outside, my meal would still be, a part of what I introduce. Now, I've left home very early. I've left home from like probably about 17, 18. And since the day I am living on my own, I have never cooked meat in my house. So being on my own, I learned to, become a vegetarian. Because I was a vegetarian before a vegan. I am now presently a vegan. Yeah? So it was step by step to reach, this, and becoming a vegan was what gave me, the courage to grow my own vegetable. I've had experiences where, becoming a vegetarian, going on the road and you can't find nothing to partake of. Even if you go out and you say you can't get no vegetable and you might order some rice, and some raw veg. I had an experience. Yeah, when my daughter was going to, just starting college, and go out and couldn't find nothing to eat and, decide to ask the restaurant person, if I could get just some rice, but, old people always, introduce or allow you to feel and experience. Maybe you were experiencing it and you never know. This thing about gut feelings, So, when you were a child, maybe before you could express how you feel, maybe spending more time to understand why am I feeling this way. Now, when you reach that stage where you could identify the different mood and the different feelings, and you can express your feelings for your own self, then is when you realize that, we are sentient beings. So there is when you start to understand your own gut feelings. And I was talking about the story of going to the restaurant person and, finding out if I could get just some rice and peas, and I would have that alone, but somehow my gut feelings tell me say something alright, and I start to spin up the meal, and there is when I realize that, sometimes people cook rice and peas out here and then put pigtail in it, or they put pork skin in it to cook it. For whatever reason, maybe them say it make the rice and peas taste better. But when I realized there was pork skin in the meal, luckily I never started eating it, because being a vegetarian then, my awareness, my antenna, old people that say my antenna up. So my wavelength, the wavelength that I'm now on, is on a different level, because I can tell you that becoming a vegetarian or becoming a vegan, you will realize that your energy level lift up, your awareness lift up, so there will be always something within me testing, am I eating the right thing? Is this right? I remember one time going to one of these patty place and order vegetable patty, and something, my gut feelings are telling me say something alright, so I decide to open the patty in a two, and then when I realize, I see this curry looking thing, and I realize say a chicken patty. When I take back the patty in the store, because if you grew up in a Jamaica in the 80s and the 90s and you see a Rasta man with him locks, no cover, and especially if him locks thick. So when I came in back, wasn't angry or anything, but when them see me, it's like everybody start run, because there and then maybe them realize that them do something wrong. But I wasn't there to beat down on anybody, because one of my philosophy is not to quarrel with people over food, because food is, my granny always say, and everything go down in your stomach will be able to come back out, so I'm always, try to be nice, as the Bible says, soft answer turn it away, wrath, grievous words stir up anger. Yeah, so I always think and meditate. Even when I used to go to the barber, I say, why would you get angry with a barber when him have, the razor, the knife under your neck, Yeah, it's same thing with people who prepare food for you. Yeah, you have to treat them good, because them have the angle and them have the option to do whatever they want to do. But I don't really want to go down in a that. But the reasoning that I'm having with my beloved family is that coming now and planting vegetables, planting callaloo, planting pak choy, planting kale, it is who we were identified as a child group growing up in Jamaica, growing up in the Caribbean in the 80s and the 90s. Because late 90s, early 2000, a lot of things change, You start to have a lot of fast food place. So people have option, and my granny always say, if you have one pair of suit, then you won't worry yourself what you are going to put on tomorrow. You know that's the one pair of suit what you are going to put on. So the option that we have as a child was a great option, because we never have any other choices but to eat the natural stuff, the natural vegetable, you know, not partaking of the things that are now created in the lab. You understand? And in the 20th century, you know, if you are somebody who think about the economy, the demand for food is more higher. You know, the demand for food is more higher. So yeah, and there are more opportunities for business people. So because the demand is higher, it is no more about quality. Yeah, they are up to high standard, but when I'm talking about quality, I'm talking about more natural food in its most natural form. Yeah, what we are talking about when we plant the callaloo, because these callaloo plants were planted from seedlings, and I had no alternative fertilizer on them. All that I had in the soil before planting them was the foul manure, which you have a lot of people would be against that. May have people who say, boy, them not eat the callaloo because foul manure is on them. Yeah? But that's your choice. That's what is in the foul manure, what is in the foul, yeah, feces, is just the same things that you feed the fowl with. Yeah, the water and the feeding. That's what is in the fowl manure, you know. So I mean, that's what one of the most natural thing that you can put on your plants. And after 2 weeks they are looking lovely. What you think? Yeah man, they are looking lovely. So in the Caribbean garden living channel, you know, we never reach the stage to forget who we are or forget where we're coming from. It is always something in the back of our mind, in the front of our mind, in the front back of our brain, if something goes so, that this is who I am, this is who I should be, you know. I shouldn't change that for nothing at all, you know. And not only vegetables, but, you know, if you grew up in a Jamaica too, aloe vera is a plant that always there in your backyard. You know, if you get a cut or a bruise, you could have run for your little piece of aloe vera, you know, break your piece of aloe vera, you know, peel off the skin, you know, yeah, and rub that area. I'm just demonstrating, even though I don't have a cut or a bruise now, and you would have just rub the area. The other thing I learned, you know, going to school, you know, doing science, doing biology, you know, and understanding the body, understanding that your skin is one of the largest organs. Yeah? Now, I experience when I rub the aloe vera on my skin. I never put it inside my mouth, I never put it on my tongue. But eventually, I start to taste the aloe vera when I rub on my skin inside of my mouth. Now, my instinct and my awareness start to tell me, say, because of that, you have to be careful of the things where you rub even on your skin. Yeah, we know we have to lose lotion and them thing there, But we need to be aware of the ingredients and the stuff in these things that we are using. Even the roll-on we roll on under our arm. You know, yesterday I was talking to somebody who have an issue where them no perspire none at all. And if they do perspire, they urinate less. So in that situation you realize that they are having an excretion problem, you know, and old people that say the body in a trouble. Yeah. Now I never introduce the person that for go doctor because they are already, you know, they get, yeah, advice from them doctor already because them blood pressure did high. Yeah, but I'm just sharing that. So I'm saying in the Caribbean, in Jamaica where I am, would I have plants around the place like aloe vera. So if you get a cut or a bruise, that's the option you have. You don't have no other option. You know, growing up around my grandparents, you know, I would spend holidays with them. Yeah, I would have plants like fresh cut, which fresh cut is another herb plant that have similar, you know, benefits like the aloe vera. If you get a cut or a bruise too, you can just pound up the fresh cut plant and you know, you would grow up with plants like marigold around the place. But when you have more experience, when you become an adult, then you realize that marigold plant is not just for beautification. Marigold plant is a natural pest control. So you seen me planting it in the callaloo bed here, it helped to also deter pests. Now kale at that time when I was growing up was more of an expensive vegetable. I knew about pop chai, yeah, but kale was a more expensive plant even when you become an adult and you start to be responsible to find your own food, find your own meal, you know. Kale would be one of those vegetables where would be classified as the more expensive vegetable. Yeah. But you know, you plant your own garden in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, yeah, then you realize that it is less expensive if you plant your own kale or if you plant your own vegetable. Now lemongrass, fever grass is another, you know, Caribbean backyard, you know, where you would find a plant like this, lemongrass, fever grass, you know. But when we were growing up, we knew it as fever grass, yeah, you know. But with its, we only know about it for tea them time there. But when we gather more experience, then we realize that with its, you know, amazing aroma, it can use, you know, it can use in a nice oil, coconut oil or, you know, olive oil, and it can use to rub your skin, it can use in your ear, you know. So experience teacheth wisdom. Rosemary is another plant that we grew up with, you know, in our backyard. Yeah? But just like the fever grass, the lemongrass, yeah, we mostly just know that these plants are for tea purpose. Now, just like the lemongrass with its amazing aroma, you know, its distinct smell, rosemary have its own distinct smell and flavor and everything. But even then, as a small child growing up, we only knew about it for tea purpose, you know. But when we gather more experience and start to explore herbs, then we realize that the same rosemary, you know, we never even gather enough knowledge about the benefits of rosemary. We never even realize, you know, when we can't remember things, you know, rosemary would help us, you know. But there's one spiritual brethren, you know, Moji, when they have a reasoning and they are reasoning, I say, you know, when you were a child, because you never forget yet, then you don't have any reason to remember. Now, when you become an adult, because you forget, then now you have to remember. And when I say this, what I'm talking about, we never have to think where the fever grass, the benefits of the fever grass. Yeah, if we have little sniffle, you know, if you have little cough, little cold, mommy, daddy, granny would have say, go get the fever grass. Yeah, and because we trust our parents, yeah, we trust it go work. Well, the same with the rosemary. We never have to wonder if it will work. We never have to try to figure out what are the benefits. We drink some rosemary tea and we know we feel better. We become more calmer. So that's the reason when I say, as a child, you never forget, so you don't have to remember. When you become an adult, yeah, you forget. So now you have to start training yourself again to remember. Yeah. So that is it. So rosemary was another plant that was in our garden. Yeah. Now, my experience with my grandmother and my aunt, may their soul rest in peace. Yeah, they transitioned. My grandmother transitioned recently. My auntie transitioned about a year or two now. But both of them always say, never out of this plant. This is just a small one I have a try catch back. This is called spirit weed. Yeah, and if you grew up in a Jamaica or in the Caribbean and you know about spirit weed, you know where your old people them would tell you say, once you have this, yeah, no unwanted present will, you know, pass through your place. Yeah, and you hear the name suggest spirit, so you know what you're talking about. Yeah, so there are certain plants. Over here we have a Scotch bonnet pepper plant. Yeah, these things ever in our backyard. Yeah, nowadays a pound of pepper, a dozen pepper sometimes become so expensive that, yeah, you can't even afford it, you know. And I said, this is who we are. We never even know about expense, because these things we would have planted them and have them in our yard. Yeah, welcome to Caribbean garden living. Yeah, so it's all about remembering who we are, you know. And I said I grew up in Jamaica in the 80s and the 90s. Yeah, without fast food. Yeah, with all of these things. Never have the option. Maybe we have too much option now. This is another flower plant. If you grew up in the Caribbean. Yeah, I even say watch clips. Maybe in Africa and see them plant here. You know? This plant is a plant that, you know, people use. Them even plant it as a fencing. You know, people who couldn't afford to build a concrete wall. Yeah? Yeah. People would have used this, or after I leave here, so I show you another plant where old people them would have used as the fencing. But this plant here was not just for fencing. Yeah, this plant is called dragon blood. Now, as you hear me talk about the spirit weed, yeah, that's the same information we get from our old people about this plant. Once you have this plant around your place, no unwanted present would have come up. Yeah, so dragon blood, people use it for fencing, people plant it in a pot, put it around them place. Yeah, yeah. So I have a few of them around the place. Yeah, man. This would be another go-to fencing plant. This is called croton. Yeah. This is called croton. You know, you have one where they call Sam's croton. And you have different type of, you have the broader leaf one, but I don't have any of that. No. Yeah, man, so this is herbal life, herbal laws, lifestyle. You know, this is the Caribbean livity. And when I choose the name for this channel, I say Caribbean garden living. That name helped me to reflect as a child growing up that this was who I am. You know, this was no pretending. This was no pretending to be nothing else other than who I am. You know, so I try to, you know, have a lot of the things when we used to have, like tamarind, you know, which we know tamarind was sour. Yeah, we maybe know then that tamarind is a laxative, because when we eat it, we go to bathroom. But our favorite way to use tamarind as a child growing up is when they make tamarind ball. Yeah? But the more we get older and the more we start, you know, exploring herbs, exploring the plants and what they are good for, we realize that tamarind is a good laxative. Tamarind full of vitamin C. Yeah, I'll show you one next tree. So on this tree here, this is a passion. This is a passion plant running on this tree. And the tree that the passion plant is running up on is called locust, thinking toe. Yeah? Yeah. We only knew about locust for what the Bible talk about. Locust. Yeah? But when I start to explore more about herbs, when I start to explore making natural juices for a living, then I realized, you know, the thinking toe and the tamarind is a good mixture together. Yeah, man. And then I realized, you know, so the thinking toe is a blood builder. Yeah. And when the both of them together, whoa, the energy way it give body. Yeah. So Yeah, man. Welcome to the Caribbean. Welcome to Caribbean Garden Living. Yeah, man. Share it with a friend, share it with a family. Amen. Hallelujah. See you in another one. Peace.